Hello, it's the Reasonably Effective podcast brought to you by myself, Uncommon Fossil, and my partner, 10 Types. And so, 10 Types, how has your week been going for you?
It's been going pretty good. I've started the a bracket fights style video where I've chosen like 16 Pokemon, and you've been a part of that as well. And I've just
Yes.
posted community polls on my channel, so check that out if you haven't checked that out. But actually, it'll probably be done by the time you check it out. But anyways, it's where I have like bracket fights. It's made by the same company or whatever that makes the tier maker website,
Hmm.
and pretty much you select a bunch of things and then you kind of match them up against each other in a 1v1 tournament. And so I have it where where the two of us, we're both making our own brackets, predicting how
Hmm.
my audience is going to vote because your audience doesn't have as many people.
That's true. And I've only done one poll, and I think I got one response,
Yeah,
possibly.
I think that
So
was me.
probably it was. But I'm not obviously active with the polls. My audience is smaller. But so this is inspired by March Madness, right? With as people pick out their
I
brackets.
guess
Where
honestly it wasn't, but I like looked at I was out somewhere and I saw March Madness and I was like, oh wait, that's like what I'm doing. Obviously, it's very similar.
it is. I suspect subconsciously it probably connected. So,
Yeah,
and, and,
probably.
and and how has your playing been going this week for you?
It's been going all right, I guess. I've been having to like suffer through more live, and it's definitely like getting kind of bad, in terms of like toxicity on the ladder because there's a rank ladder. It's a
Mhm.
bit more toxic than PTCGL, and the casual ladder is like not good. Luckily, pretty much everyone plays on the rank ladder, so it's not as bad as it could be, but still like you're never gonna like finish a game on the rank ladder almost ever. Um, and I haven't been getting timed out too much, but I've definitely been having some like, disconnection issues where either me or my opponent have disconnected, so um, it's not great.
All right. I mean, I still have less issues than you in live in general, I think. The toxicity issue is certainly there for sure. You had predicted the rank ladder would be bad for that. And I also think the fact that the beta is still fairly buggy, that doesn't help anybody's disposition. So there's less courtesy because of that too. So hopefully things improve, but we will see. And we'll talk more about live shortly. But for me, it's been a good week, I think, with Pokemon. I have been spent a bunch of the time playing Lugia Archeops, so nothing very exciting there. I know I'm one of those people, but I've avoided Lugia Archeops for the most part because it's a deck that I I'm still kind of get confused myself, right? I still attach my powerful energy to my Charizard, and then I'm surprised that it doesn't boost it and stuff. So I'm still getting to know it, but I've improved a lot at it, and actually kind of tweaked the deck list on my own in ways that I think were positive changes. So I'm comfortable with the deck, and it's going to rotate obviously, but at least I know where it's at now. And obviously, it's going to be one of the decks to play post rotation. I think
Um, Wait, what you said it's a deck to play post rotation?
not this build, but Lugia Archeops, obviously with probably the single strike build, I suspect.
Yeah, I think so. I've been looking at some like Scarlet and Violet tournament results, and it's like it's doing all right, but it's not doing super well. The single strike package is even more inconsistent. Lugia Archeops isn't the most consistent deck right now.
Yeah.
Um, and more importantly, if it misses, it just completely whiffs. So if you like miss your V Star power, you essentially can't do anything.
Hmm.
So yeah, I feel like it getting less consistent is certainly not good for it, but um, it's like obnoxious now. It's like the game's decided within like the first two turns. Usually one player sets up and the other player doesn't, or one player or
Yeah.
they both set up and the one player who goes first wins. So that's not super fun. Or it's just like
Yeah.
hard counters, and then it's not like the most fun deck in the game right now. But I've been enjoying like the format's kind of interesting. I've been playing like Palkia and Teleon, which is kind of fun with some
Hmm.
various techs in it. Honestly, Mew VMAX isn't like the least fun. It's kind of cool. It like has an interesting engine, obviously very powerful, but there's a lot of path too, so it's kind of weird in that,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think it's time to move into talk more about live, right?
Yeah.
And I downloaded the mobile app, so
So
yeah.
how's that gone? Your phone didn't burst on fire or anything like people like to complain
Yeah,
about?
no, I don't think it. Some people have said it like drains battery life and stuff. I didn't find that to be an issue. I only played like two games or something, but it didn't like it kind of worked. One of the biggest issues was the cards didn't really like render. So you'd
Mhm.
like see your starting hand and you see like one card in there or something, and it's like which basic do you want to put down, and you like don't see what your other basic is, and then also when you search your deck. So I wasn't on very like the best internet, but I mean really that's where mobile games are like usually played, and not the best internet. The internet certainly should have been good enough, um, and then it's awkward, like stuff's cut off, which doesn't seem right. I think you said this before, that the game feels like it's designed for mobile, but it didn't really
Mhm.
feel like it was designed for mobile. The bench was like felt kind of awkward, and it just wasn't great. I do think I did like match into opponents, which I was honestly surprised about, that worked
Mhm.
completely fine. um, and overall it wasn't like as bad as I thought. If you look at like the App Store reviews, it's
Yeah.
like two, somewhere between 2 and 3 stars, which is pretty bad. Of course, like all the comments are pretty brutal. They're all saying like the highest I could find was like 3 stars, and the person still said the game doesn't work. But it's honestly not horrendously awful. It's not something
No.
I'm not sure if I could really recommend it, especially because like I can't imagine it's great for the battery. If I'd played it longer, my phone might have started to heat up, or like
Mhm.
ran through the battery quickly. Um, it's not great, and also it's not a good mobile game, and the fact that it's just so long.
Yeah, I mean, those are good points. I mean, the fact, and I haven't played mobile in a bit, but it's okay on mobile. You can actually see your whole deck on mobile, which you can on the computer, which is a bit odd considering the screen size and stuff. Um, the fact that it heats up the phone some and does drain the battery means it's using too many resources, and that's not a good sign. And like you said, Pokemon's a long game, which doesn't suit itself to mobile. They probably should make it landscape. That will help the layout some, but it's tough, obviously, fitting the whole Pokemon board onto a phone screen. And they have different aspect ratios, different phones, so that might be part of the awkwardness too, how they accommodate that.
Honestly, it wasn't like that bad, in terms of like seeing what was going on. But if you're not like an experienced player, I think you'd have no idea what was
Mm.
going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of problematic, as phone games are more designed to be casual, and like
Yeah.
I feel like with a mobile game, a game can't last more than 5 minutes. And Pokemon usually like essentially always lasts longer than that unless someone just concedes. Really 5 minutes is pushing it. Like the longer
Mhm.
games that I play are like maybe 5 minutes, but like usually it's like you sit down on the toilet and then you play a game, and then you finish the game and then you get up. That's kind of like what a mobile game should be designed for, and like just how people play it, because otherwise you could play a game on something else.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think Pokemon doesn't lend itself to mobile. Maybe like a couple another format, but that's a later quest, something to consider maybe at another time. Um, but obviously, it's a big market, so I understand why Pokemon's trying to get access to it too, because there are a lot of potential ways to grow this. Although since they're not monetizing still, more users doesn't get them anything. So, but that's its own question too.
Yeah, definitely. And then you did some stuff with live this week, or did you not do too much with it?
Um, I was looking at, yeah, there were some questions from me. People are obviously in the process of migrating more so because we've got Scarlet and Violet is coming out the Thursday, so a few days from today, Thursday, what, the 30th, I think it is.
Yeah.
Um, and that's if you want to play the new cards, you have to be in live, right? They're not coming to PTCGO, so it's forcing people to live. And if you want to be able to get quick access to the cards, you need to migrate your account. Otherwise, it's tough to get the resources together to get a lot of stuff for it. So people are going to live, and there's questions about migration and prepping your accounts. I've done some. One of the things is right now when you migrate your account for cards that you have like extra duplicates between your PTCGO account and live account, you seem to get some dusting credits, which you're not supposed to do, but it seems that's happening. So there's questions about that and whether that's going to get taken away in this update because there's doing an update Tuesday, I think, to prepare everything for Scarlet and Violet on Thursday. So I was looking at that some, but mostly playing this week, I got to say.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's like, it's not like horrible, but it's not really improving, which is certainly not a good sign.
Well, they did an update. Was it this week? recently they had an update, and it did fix some things. So
Well, it
that's
undid some of the like issues that they previously added. I think the main one was the
yeah.
like the well they did patch like the Student Zoroark and like the
Hmm.
Galarian Slowbro V, Slow King V, I don't know. And then they fixed they like added in an option to reduce the animations, but it's still like
Hmm.
kind of they're still there, and they
Yeah.
just it's just like problems that they kind of created in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you play it much, you know that they make the big sound when a metal Pokemon becomes the active, which is surprising for someone like myself that has the volume turned off in the game. It just blares out at you. You can't make progress on the V challenge still. So there's a lot of number of issues. It's very much a beta still, and that's to me why it doesn't make a lot of sense why they're forcing people to do it, obviously, because most people want to do the new cards, but it's not ready for people. And I think part of the disconnecting issue where things desync, I think, is that the servers get maybe overwhelmed, is what I hear. So forcing more people into live is only going to make that worse. And I'm certainly concerned about that, with Scarlet and Violet and people jumping in.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I was looking at like Limitless in the biggest tournament series, the late night series, which
Hmm.
honestly has like had like issues in the past, but they're gonna be running I think their events in live, which just seems crazy.
Right.
That like that can't go well. I mean, I'm obviously not like a competitive player, so I don't care that much, but it's just I don't know. It seems silly for them to be running the events on that.
Hmm.
Although it kind of makes sense to keep up with the current Stern format, but also it's going to create some. I predict it's going to have major problems.
Yeah.
Possibly it will just be unplayable, but hopefully it works fine. If it works fine, I'll be very pleased. But if it doesn't, it's I think there's like a 50% chance it's just you're not going to be able to play the game, and they'll just like you either don't find matches or it just like
Hmm.
crashes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of things we could say. I'll just want to say there's three big questions right now regarding Scarlet and Violet coming to me. One, the battle pass will reset. So what do we see on that? Which, I'm hoping at least one of the decks is with an EX card, if not both of them. Are we going to get new starter decks? Because if they don't do that, then new players are going to be handed a bunch of decks that they can't actually play, and that's not a very friendly thing for new users, which they should care about. And then do we all get the new decks? Hopefully we do, right? It'd be a good way to help get some of the new cards. And then just as you were touching, is it going to work, right? With adding this in, it's been a bumpy road to this point. So there'll be at least minor issues, and very well could be major issues when this happens.
Yeah, so I think that's enough alive though. I don't think there's too much to say right at the moment. I'll certainly be on Thursday. I think it's at I don't remember
I
some point during the day on Thursday. It's just gonna stuff's gonna
Mhm.
happen, and we'll see how it goes. I might
Yeah.
honestly post a video on the Thursday, um, but probably the next day, just seeing what happens. Obviously, with the new set is the big hype, but also live could just like erupt in flames.
Yeah, I mean, depending, obviously, I think it depends where you live in your time zone. I think it's whenever the daily challenges reset. I think that time is when the whole thing resets.
Oh wow, okay, that's pretty weird. What if you like change your time zone then, and like on your computer or whatever?
Well, I think that's what it is, though, from what I can gather. So it's I think was it 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, I think.
Okay.
So, but anyway, so we want to move on to the next thing, I think, which we want to talk about one of the top theme decks, right? Soaring Storm. It's obviously with people moving away from PTCGO, the theme format. We're saying goodbye to that. So one of the strongest decks historically has been Soaring Storm, and just want to kind of talk about that. You want to start us off with that deck?
Sure. So it's obviously if you played theme deck format, it's probably you consider it one of the best decks. If you don't,
Hmm.
I feel like you just have to. It's very good. Um, in the theme deck format,
Yeah.
Dragonite is one of the strongest Pokemon with its ability to do massive damage and have massive HP, and also accelerate energy to the rest of your opponent Pokemon relatively consistently. And
Yep.
then also with a strong engine, the Pidgeot engine, a wide variety of strong attackers in Thundurus, Tornadus, and Lantern as well. And then the rest of the deck is just all very consistent for a theme
Hmm.
deck, so it's very good.
Yeah, I mean, it's got there might not be a bad card. Like for the Pokemon, I
Like,
guess
yeah,
Pidgeot may be questionable, although it still has some use. But honestly, if there's only one card that's bad of the Pokemon, that's better than possibly every other theme deck out there. Certainly better than most.
yeah.
Um,
I think a lot of the other top decks actually have well, it's not something like s- uh, wow, what is it? I was gonna say Roaring Resolve, Relentless Flame. There you go. That's like
yeah,
almost all. That's all good Pokemon.
yeah, that one is yes, correct. That one it doesn't have a bad one in it. Oh, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean that's obviously a very good deck. Also, you start from Grimer, which gets you to draw for free, so that's very useful. The two retreat costs sometimes is an issue. Like you said, it has an engine in Pidgeotto, which most decks and theme decks don't have any engine. So getting one or two Pidgeottos in play is very nice. And then good attackers. There's the spread threat with Tornadus that can help, and it can help fix the numbers too to one shot something with a Thunderous or the Lantern. Also, besides just you usually don't take multi-prize turns occasionally, but it helps set up numbers. And then being able to attack for 70 with Thunderous on turn two, if that's the way the game goes for you, is very nice. And obviously, Lantern being able to accelerate energy to it and do 140 damage is quite nice. So, a good selection of attackers.
Yeah, I definitely like the versatility of the deck is kind of interesting. It's not like the most versatile. It's when you look at other decks, you see like uh, Relentless Flame with its ability to wall
Hmm.
and like Unseen Depths with its ability to snipe. But
Yeah.
I think it has like a solid, moderately wide variety of attackers. Surprisingly, the weakness is kind of weird. Lightning type
Hmm.
is an alright type to hit for weakness. You do hit Empoleon for weakness, but it actually doesn't come into effect too much, especially when you're looking at something like Lantern. You do still need to discard the energy.
Right.
70 is not enough to get KO with a weakness, but um, it's still pretty interesting.
Hmm.
And then I think it's like the Lantern being able to charge itself up. You don't, and the Thunders and Tornadus being relatively cheap, you don't actually have to use Dragonite to win a game. It's certainly very important if both people are setting up well. But if your opponent's
Hmm.
like setting up at a relatively average pace, you can go in with Thunderous early.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and actually, in terms of typing, the Lightning they're really the big attackers for the cheaper costs, but they're fighting weak, so fighting decks can pose a problem for it, because you really almost have to attack with those Lightning attackers, especially early on to get things going. So
Yeah.
that's a
Mhm.
vulnerability there.
Yeah, I mean there are like only two fighting decks that see play. The one's Gland Surfetch, which isn't particularly good, but then
Right.
Towering Heights, and then that's a really interesting matchup actually because of when you're looking at the fighting type, you can also go with Tornadus, which resists
Yeah.
fighting, but
Hmm.
then it's a spread based attacker, it doesn't do a ton of damage, which honestly is not good for like it's you don't want to be a spread deck against them. They do have both
Right.
Mew and they get powered up by having damage on their bench, so
Yeah.
Tornadus here isn't actually that good.
No, but obviously it not only is it not weak, but it does resist also by 20. So depending what they have, they pretty much can't one shot you. And sometimes if they're setting up like with the one that does the 60 damage, right, the stage one, they actually have to like three shot you. So
Yeah. They probably won't do that though, because they're also
no,
damaging their own bench, and then you're damaging their bench, and that can't be
right,
good for them. But it's a solid like wall on the deck, and then of course if you set up Dragonite, you're in a very good spot.
yeah,
And I think like Dragonite's a very important aspect. It's like it allows you to Dragonite can really beat anything. Keep in mind that you can't actually power up Dragonite in one turn. You can stream
hmm,
it. It discards three. You can attach three next turn, but you can't attach four unless you have two Dragonites set up.
right.
Also, really interestingly, the Dragonaire's attack I think is pretty good, but you essentially never see it used because the only way to power it up is with another Dragonite.
Right. I mean, you'd have to have a Dragonite, or you actually could have two Dragonites and a Dragonair, I guess. I don't know that I've ever gotten that, but because there's three Dragonairs. But it does 70 damage for four energy. That's a lot. But your opponent, you discard an energy off your opponent's active. So, and obviously it's 100 HP, which is okay. No weakness, really, essentially. I mean, Dragon is weak to Fairy here, but there's really no Fairy decks in themed, essentially. So, um, it's good. And it plays 20 energy, which is probably about where a lot of these theme decks are, but you burn through energy fast. So you do have to be a little bit careful if you start a game and have to occasionally those games where Dragonite is what you start attacking with, chucking away 3 energies per turn, it adds up. You have to be careful.
Yeah, I feel like you shouldn't run out of energy, but if you're retreating and attacking with Dragonite, then you can
Yeah.
definitely run out of energy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you just need to be careful. Usually, you have to commit to getting the knockouts early, um, and obviously, like with Lantern, you can power it up. Like in a game where you have to manually attach to Lantern 3 times and then you discard when you attack, that's not good for advancing things either. But there's the retreat cost of 1 for like Tornadus and Thunderous. There's games you can get in where you kind of start switching between those and stuff, which works well. You have 2 things to retrieve energy. You have the energy recycle system that gets 1 into hand, which is often what you need to get to power things up. But then, if you put 3 into the deck, which is even better if you can do that to kind of keep the system going. You have Fisherman to put 4 from the discard into your hand. So it would be nice if you had like another one of each of those cards. Obviously, it would make things easier and more consistent with the deck. But, theme decks aren't built for maximum consistency anyway.
Yeah, and like this list it plays a lot of good supporters as well. Pokemon Fan
Hmm.
Club, obviously, with having some strong basics, is very good. And then
Yes.
Cynthia, Tate, and Liza are very
Hmm.
strong supporters. Bellcatcher and How aren't like horrible, and at least you get them. So really, in
Right.
the trainer lineup, there's nothing that's that bad. Honestly, Lily is generally not very good though, because you often have a very large hand, especially with the Pidgeotto engine.
Yeah, I mean Lily is often worse than How I find. If you go second, and you get lucky, you can Lily turn 1, it's good, but later in the game you're drawing for maybe a card or two, if anything. So if I can draw 3 cards to equal How, I'm usually happy with Lily. So that's probably the weakest card in it.
Yeah,
And I don't know, and Pokemon Catcher is obviously a very nice
but
card in the deck.
wait,
I
what?
mean Pokemon Communication, I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, yeah.
That's what you generally need to hit into like your Dragonite or something at some point in the game, or your Lantern.
Yeah, or your Pidgeotto. Often an early Pidgeotto with Pokemon Communication is very good. And you can
Hmm.
often get like one of your either the Dragonite line or the Pidgeotto line up early, especially if you
Yeah.
have the Alolan Grimer. And you can also use Collect on Pidgey. Collect on Pidgey isn't too bad. The issue is it obviously has low HP, it doesn't do any damage, that type of thing,
Right.
but it's certainly an okay option that will get you set up eventually.
Right. I mean, it being Lightning Weak, obviously, if you're in the mirror, you might just get knocked out with Thunderous with 2 energies on it and Tornadus on the bench. So it's not, it's risky, right? If it's getting knocked out, you have to attach and then it's knocked out. Then you don't have anything powered up for the next turn. But
Yeah, it's definitely much worse than like Alolan Grimer, but it's not awful, especially if you have to use it. It doesn't feel too bad. Um,
yeah, I mean, the deck, with learning the deck, part of it's getting that feel of when do you start to set up the Dragonite line versus when do you go for the Pidgeotto line. Those are the first 2 to prioritize, and then the Lantern is usually, I think, the third one of the evolution lines to get going. So the Lantern, you want to get Lantern set up early so it gets energy onto it, but it's hard to prioritize that, I find.
yeah, I agree. It's kind of weird. Lantern's honestly a very good Pokemon,
Hmm.
um, but in this deck, it just kind of struggles sometimes to find like a good use, especially
Yeah,
because like it's in another theme deck I think that's pretty bad, but it's very
yeah.
good in that theme deck because it's not an energy acceleration based theme deck, so it just
Hmm.
provides a little bit of extra oomph. Versus in this deck where you have all this power, in terms of energy acceleration, it just isn't super good. You also have powerful attackers,
Yeah.
so it's not that necessary. And you'd rather have like a mid-range attacker in this deck. You don't really have anything of that sort, which is really interesting. You do have Thunderous and Tornadus, which are just hit pretty hard, in Dragonite and Lantern, which all hit
Yeah.
hard. But you don't have anything to hit that like. I mean, Tornadus is kind of a mid-range attacker, but it's kind of expensive. You,
Yeah.
you really want something like an Ambipom or a Palpitoad that just hits like mid-range damage on like a stage 1. And I think that's kind of what like the number one thing this deck's missing.
Yeah, I think you're right. In a sense, the Thunderous, even though it's a basic, when it does 70 for 2 with a Tornadus in place, so that combination kind of makes it like a stage 1 at mid range, in a sense. But
Hmm.
it's not the same, obviously.
Yeah, I think like, Thunderous I guess does fulfill that role, but yeah, not as like it's just a little bit different. I guess Thunder though does do a pretty good job of it. Um, but yeah, I think that's all there is to say about this theme deck. But now
Yep.
we're also going to talk about theme decks in general and the format, because obviously with live it appears that we're not having theme deck format. You can't even like play them. That's not true. You can play them in expanded ladder, but all the
Right.
theme decks are going to be rotating essentially. There are a few cards in
Yep.
the theme deck staying, but they stopped at Vivid Voltage, so no more theme decks, which is really unfortunate because I think the theme deck format as a whole is one of my is it might be my favorite format. It's essentially been discontinued for years now, which makes it a bit less exciting. But if it was still continued, I bet I'd find it my favorite format still.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice format. There's enough decks to choose from that it's not stale, but you know your deck and you know all the matchups you're likely to see. So it's kind of a little more relaxing in some ways. You can kind of autopilot to an extent, but you're still making a lot of decisions. So I think it's good, and it's good for new players. You don't have to worry about deck construction, just learning to play a deck, which I think is a plus. Yeah, I wish they had kept making the theme decks. They've done with the V battle decks, I guess, is kind of the replacement for the theme decks. Um,
Yeah.
it, and they're kind of similar, right? They throw in one V Pokemon in them, so it doesn't make the deck overpowered. I'm not sure how it would have gone if they allowed those V battle decks to mix in with theme decks. Um, but you have that as an option, I guess, going forward. But yeah, I wish they had kept up with the theme deck. So it's got obviously a very long history with Pokemon. I think it's nice to continue history rather than giving up on it like Pokemon did here.
Yeah. Also, with the V Battle decks, like the theme decks are meant to correspond to a new set. When there's a new set,
Hmm.
there's obviously the booster packs. There's going to be Elite Trainer box, a booster box. None of those really have too much character other than like the box art or whatever pack art, which has some
Hmm.
character. Shows us some of the Pokemon in the set. You see the pre-release kits, which do show off the set some, and then we see the theme decks, which also show the set off a lot. In the V Battle decks, well, they are very similar to theme decks. They aren't corresponding to main sets like the theme decks do. I don't exactly know what they correspond to. They kind of correspond to sets. A lot of them are mini sets. Um, so it's just kind of weird. But we see, like,
Hmm.
I don't even know which ones we've seen. I think we've seen, is the newest one the Deoxys and Zeraora? That could be, which,
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking at the Zero Aura deck here. So, and it's like a theme deck. It's got four Great Ball. It's got four Hop. They're throwing those cards at you that you only play in theme decks, really.
yeah, but they're still fun. I haven't played the V Battle X much, but the idea is
No.
still cool. But they're not implemented in the online client at all. So they're just a bit underwhelming, and they don't really
Hmm.
showcase the game very well either. Not as well as Theme Decks, I wouldn't say. Not this Theme Deck showcase the game. They don't showcase the standard format or like the competitive format that people are used to, but they do showcase, I think, pure Pokemon. And honestly, comparing standard format to theme format, I'd say Theme Deck format is more of the pure Pokemon experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the top decks trying to grind it out. So it's more average decks that have a certain bit of randomness and could use improvements. So, but it forces you to work with them. So it's not a bad thing. Obviously, on PTCGO, they didn't put the V battle decks in the in-game store, so therefore, even so they weren't accessible. Right? The theme decks for budget players were accessible to everyone in PTCGO. So, but now that obviously we do have things like V battle decks are accessible in live, so it opens up some
Mhm.
possibilities there. Um, one of in PTCGO, I think it was unfortunate in one sense with theme decks that they forced you to play theme decks a lot. Like the daily challenges there were type based, and you might not have a standard deck that you like to play. It was very good at the time for a type, so it was easy to go to a theme deck to get through your challenges and stuff. With live, they've changed it. They've gotten rid of types for the challenges, which is probably good. So it gives you more flexibility.
Yeah,
Um,
like with the V challenge and stuff.
well, that doesn't work. But the fact that like the global beta was launched while Lugia was the big deck. Obviously, wouldn't have been good if you had to do type challenges while everyone's playing Lugia. So, um, But look, they need to get the V challenge fixed. But I think it's better not to have to play, a water deck or a fire deck if you don't want to, right? Because it forced you to play a deck you didn't want to on certain days, I think.
Yeah, especially when it was like a fairy deck or like a dark deck, it was like
Yeah,
impossible. I mean, dark was like viable in standard, but fairy obviously didn't even like exist in standard. Um,
right.
so I see the validity in that, but I think there needs to be another format. I found that in
Yeah.
PTCGO, I'd like rotate between all four formats. Generally, I wouldn't do too much legacy or too much expanded, but
Hmm.
I'd play themed and standard, and then I
Yep.
would try legacy and expand sometimes because they're just different experiences, and you can get very
Hmm.
burnt out, especially in this stare night format, which players are trying to do like very straightforward things. So unless you want to innovate your own deck and you're a very good deck builder, you're going to struggle to find something unique. In which case, a lot of the
Yep.
decks right now are pretty generic and straightforward. Um, well, the meta itself has shifted. The playstyle of decks haven't really changed.
Hmm.
Um, I suppose Lugia does play differently than other decks, but it's not really like good differently. It's kind of just it's still very boring. It's just different, and therefore just frustrating. So with theme decks, every game's different. In standard, every game's like the same. If it's a matchup between two certain decks, pretty much every game's going to be the same unless they're very dependent on who goes first. In which case, they are still going to be the same, except that just whoever wins the coin flip will win, or
Yeah.
whoever sets up will win. But in theme decks, you can get off to slower starts, and the same matchup you'll play multiple times. It'll feel different every time.
Hmm.
They still can have annoying aspects to it, but I feel like it's just having a break from standards very important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even though you'd think themed because it's a limited set of decks that it would be more stale and repetitive, it actually does seem more gives you more variety than a lot of times that standard does, just because you have a certain limited set of decks and they all work fairly similarly. And yeah, who wins the coin toss and who sets up first, right? By the end of turn two, you know who's going to win in standard most of the time. But for themed, you know, um, it's still, there's still a lot of gameplay left, and things can develop. So, which is nice. I think, yeah, Pokemon with Live is essentially a one format game, which is not good. It's not good as a player experience. Obviously, they dropped Legacy, they dropped Theme, Expanded's there in a very nerfed form. You can't, even with the nerf form, you can't challenge your friends on it. You can't do it in the rank ladder. So they're really pushing, they don't want you to do that. They've essentially dropped Expanded from IRL. I don't, and I'm not, haven't seen any indications they want to bring that back. So I think Pokemon is kind of keeping it around now, but mostly moving on. So it's going to be one format and just standard, and that's not good. You need to be able to mix it up some.
Yeah, and I'm sure like there are other formats as well. Of course, one that
Hmm.
people love to talk about is GLC, which is certainly a
Yeah.
solid format. Honestly, GLC is pretty stale as well, and in some ways, it's very similar to standard. Especially, it's like the same. It's aimed at the same player audience as standard, which means that
Hmm.
it doesn't really make a lot of sense comparing it to themed. Um, like themed is aimed at a more casual audience. GLC was
Yeah.
originally aimed at a more casual audience, but then pretty much competitive players just took it over, and now it's kind of dead. So, um, yeah, I don't think GLC is the format that people are looking for. Certainly, you should be able to play it in live. They should have like the expanded cards in live, but um,
Yeah.
they're not there yet. There are some. I'm trying to think of other formats. There could be. I don't know. I think certainly Legacy doesn't really make sense. Anything too
No.
black and white is just kind of not good. So I don't think that would make any sense. I was honestly looking at Pokemon's like custom formats. I didn't dig into it that much, but
Okay. Right. They have a booklet there.
that's like a big mess. So yeah, they probably shouldn't go into any of those. What some format like themed, honestly, a random. So if you've heard of, I think it's on Pokemon Showdown. I don't know if that's where it is. But it's the video game. The VGC random battle format is pretty cool, and if they had something like that in the TCG, that would be awesome. I'm but I'm plugging my channel again. I'm gonna try making a video like that. I made it with cards from Theme Decks, and it was honestly pretty cool. Except for a few issues. One, that you don't necessarily have all the cards, in which case you need to go out and like get them, which is annoying. Or two, you just like the decks aren't perfect, but it's literally a program I made in like a day, so it's
Yeah.
not that good. But I think some really unique format could honestly just save live if they added a cool format. and gave it something unique, not just like a copy of the IRL game, because
Mhm.
Pokemon Online is not the same as Pokemon IRL.
No, it's not. And also we're talking about mobile. If they had a shorter, a quicker format, right? Could it be a 40 card format with four prizes, like pre-releases? Um, Something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure too. That might be a plus
Oh
because
yeah,
I,
what
I
if
think
what if they just, because pre-release kits now just come in with a deck you can change. So what if they just give you like the pre-release deck?
right they could. That's true. Right. It's now a set 40 cards. And then you swap out. They could just give you the 40 cards, and that's kind of instead of theme. Those are the decks you play. You choose from.
Mhm. Yeah, or it could be like a random deck at the beginning of every match too.
Hmm.
Because they're not actually sets. They're not exact sets of 40 cards. Um,
Yeah, that's
they have
there's some
like
variation.
variation, but they could make it like exact sets, or they could give you a random one at the start. Obviously those both kind of have issues, but those would still be like a cool idea, and that would be really fun.
Yeah, and similar to how you've talked about the random deck idea, if it was going to be something, they would have to build the random decks in live, and they do have something, in PTCGO they did have that deck builder, which what's it called again? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
the deck wizard. I'll go ahead and whip together a deck in standard
Now,
format.
yeah, as you doing that, I mean the decks are just awful. They're beyond awful. So if they were going to do something like that, they would have to improve the deck wizard because they were just these piles of garbage they put together.
Yeah,
I
let's see if I can get this together.
All
I
right.
don't really remember how this works, to be honest.
You picked like two cards, right? I think
Yeah,
one
how
or
do I
two
like
cards, and then
select
it
them?
builds around it, if I recall.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know. I built like some Arceus deck. This is like pure garbage. Yeah, it has like Karen's Conviction without any single strike Pokemon, and it's bad, but yeah, it's something. Honestly, this isn't as bad as I've seen it get. I've seen it get absolutely atrocious. Um, I mean, Karen's Conviction is literally useless. It plays four Karen's Conviction, and he plays its only draw support is a one Dan. So yeah, it's pretty bad. Four Lost Vacuum though, so won't be getting pathed anytime soon. And then a bunch of like garbage. Actually, the Pokemon lines aren't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's not great. So something better than that would be important for live, I think.
yeah, I mean the idea what they need some alternate format to standard, and even back with PTCGO, expanded was there, but it wasn't a lot of fun generally to play expanded, right? There were a lot of very high power decks that were very difficult to get the pieces for. I guess with live it'll be a little easier to get those decks, but
Yeah, although you still
um,
can't get Tropical Beach or Champions Festival, which is a bit
yeah,
problematic. We've talked about that before.
yeah. That's not great. But you can get like computer search for cheap now in live, so that's a good thing. And some of the big whatever cards that were in demand, the old cards, the prices were pretty crazy for some of those. So
Yeah, like
you
you
can
can actually get a secret rare quick ball in live on like PTCGO, where it's literally like you need to sell like everything you own to get a secret rare quick ball.
right, you can. It's actually not
They
what
give
the
it to you
call. I
for
think
free probably on the ladder, I think.
did they? I don't remember,
On like
but
the
I think
expensive decks. I wouldn't be. I think they at some point they have. I don't know if they still
they
do, but I
might
think they
have.
used to.
But I think if you craft it, the cost would be the same. It might even be cheaper than cost crafting like a V and a V Max. You might be able to get the secret rare quick ball for less. And obviously on PTC Joe, you'd pay much more for the secret for the quick ball.
Yeah,
So I don't so we don't really have I don't think an answer to this alternate format situation, but they need to get one, I think, for the health of the game. One of the things I enjoyed with Magic is they have a bunch of formats, and it just makes it more interesting. You don't have to play
yeah.
them
With
all, but
Magic
just
Arena specifically, right?
Magic Arena, yes, correct. Yeah, the online client arena. That you can play in game, and that makes it more enjoyable. You don't have to play them all, but you can find a couple different formats you like. Now, Magic is highly monetized arena, so I don't think Pokemon's going to do that. So they're not going to have as much stuff, but they need something beyond standard. here. Now, honestly, right now they need to get standard to work, so they still haven't figured that out. So I think after they get the game to work, they really need to get another format added in.
Yeah, honestly, I think if they do something like very, very like cool, like a unique new format, then
Mhm.
people would actually get behind it, and then they could, even if it's not working super well. Like right now, there's the only reason to play live is because it's the only thing available, specifically,
Hmm.
like with Scarlet and Violet. So people aren't really behind it; they're just like doing it
Yeah.
because they have to. And I think if they had the
Hmm.
support of the community, that'd be really good for them. Um, and then it could like really take off. But right now, it just like I don't know. Pokemon's I'd say struggling, especially with the online client. Like it was really booming over COVID, um,
Hmm.
and now it's just kind of like crashing back down because they weren't able to capitalize off it. Like I think Live must have been announced during COVID, right?
Yeah, yeah, because it's been I tried. Yeah, I don't. It was over what, a year and a half ago. So um, yeah, so 2021, I guess, late 2021 was it? It was announced.
Yeah, somewhere like in the heart of like COVID. I mean, we're not like out of COVID, but like
Right.
um, yeah, it was like it was the time when Pokemon was really doing pretty well. I think it was a bit on. It was like starting to fall off a tiny bit, but it was still doing well. Um, and they just weren't able to get there. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, they had a lot of momentum in the online community. The YouTubers really grew a lot. A lot of people were playing PTCGO. They even got like with the Players Cup and such. They were getting some buzz there even. And then, but they just went all in on getting things back to the IRL and not even the local stuff, just the big events. And that seems to be their what they care about, unfortunately, and almost exclusively.
Yeah, that means the game's pretty much like at a it's very inaccessible to newer players. Essentially, if you were a newer player now, you can't really grow too much in the game. There aren't really any avenues to do that. You can't go to local events. You can go to very
Yeah.
casual. You can go to casual local events, but those are harder to find. You can, but you can't really go to any competitive events, and you can't really play online and get super into that either because it's just in such a bad spot right now. So if you're a new player, honestly, I feel a little bit sorry for you. A few years ago, it was amazing to get. So many people got into it over COVID. Like got more into it over COVID, myself and
Yeah.
yourself included.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. Obviously, the world was in a horrible place, but Pokemon was like just so fun. But they haven't been able to. Unfortunately, it just it's not in a great spot right now. Of course, I do think Scarlet and Violet is getting a lot of hype,
Yes.
obviously. So hopefully that brings more new players into the game,
Hmm.
and just reinvigorates the players. Because if it doesn't, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I mean, I think new people are going to be trying out Pokemon Live, TCG Live. The question is it going to work, right? Because it could just a bunch of people could try it for the first time in the next month or two, but just find it not playable, and that's won't be good for anything. But there's a lot of excitement with Scarlet and Violet, the new mechanic with the EX. Obviously, rotation's always a big deal. So there's things to be excited about, but hopefully Pokemon can get this together.
Yeah, I do think the format is looking good post rotation though. A lot of
Hmm.
the most toxic decks, well, okay, mostly Lugia, is becoming I think a bit more. It's being toned down a bit. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily super overpowered right now. It's just I'd say unfun right now.
Hmm.
So we are gonna see that get like a big nerf. It's not gonna be unplayable. I think it'll be in a nice spot. And then we're
Hmm.
gonna see. I think Lost Zone is rising to the top, which is really cool because it's certainly one of the more interesting decks in the game. It's certainly
Yep.
skill based. And it plays differently, but it's not like completely foreign either. So I'm excited for the new format. Also, the EXs appear to be bringing some cool new decks. And rotation isn't like destroying too many decks either, which I'm really happy about. There are a few cool decks rotating, but really most of the decks that we're losing aren't that exciting. Like I'm not sad that we're losing Eternatus really. I'm not that sad that we're losing Weezing either. It kind of sucks to
Yeah.
play against. Although we are seeing some more like lock cards coming in, but um, I think they're
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, I found myself getting paralyzed a number of times this past week, and honestly, I can't remember the last time I was paralyzed in a standard game before that. It had been a long time. So maybe that being paralyzed is rough, I gotta say. So I may have to be a little more prepared to address that if that's on the rise long term.
Yeah, I guess so.
And
I'm trying to think.
we'll lose.
Some of them are like some of the tools are rotating for those cards, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't remember what set. I don't think. Oh, is Zekrom? I think Zekrom is rotating, but I don't believe Articuno, which is very strong right now, is not rotating.
Okay. And obviously we're losing the Intellian engine, and that's a big change with rotation. But things like Marnie rotating is not bad. We have Judge to come in. We lose Quick Ball, but we get Nest Ball. So those changes, it'll be interesting to see how things adjust, right? It forces a little bit of shifting, but it doesn't throw out your decks.
Yeah, so I'm just like excited. I think there's some really funky new decks that are coming, and
Yep.
some really like just um, good for everyone new decks. Notably, I think Gardevoir EX is like a very good deck in terms of the fact that it has a
Hmm.
really unique engine, well, a unique engine, but not a super unique one that it's foreign to other players. But it opens up the obviously power of the Curlia Gardevoir Gallade engine. So I'm just excited. But yeah, I hope you're all excited too, because I think that's all we have to say about it. Okay, like
Yep.
we don't have the solution for the new format thing, but hopefully we see something to come and like save the day. But yeah, check us out on YouTube and other Spotify or other podcast platforms, including Spotify. Those are
Yep.
our main platform, I think, but we were on all of them.
Yeah, we're on all the big ones now. So
So check us out on that. But our YouTube channels are Ten Types and Uncommon Fossil. So we'd really appreciate if you'd like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Of course, comment, make your thoughts. That's really the big thing. But if you enjoyed this, we hope you just check us out. And as always, we're excited to see you in the next podcast.
take care.